Hello, hello, hello. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 32 because today's my birthday, September 9th. Here we are. At least on the day of filming, it is my birthday. Whether or not this will get edited and posted on my birthday, we will see. More than likely, the answer is no. Um, I am going to try to do kind of a quick monthly wrap up for the month of August, Women in Translation Month, of course. And I'm hoping just to I don't really want to say get it over with, but it's kind of what I'm wanting to do. I would just want to film it and be done with it. I'm finding I don't love doing monthly wrap ups. I think that I like to be able to talk about the books as I'm freshly coming off of them, and so I think what I need to do now is just adapt the way that my filming goes so that I can do more weekly wrap ups and kind of go from there. But nonetheless, I do want to give the thoughts of all of the books that I did read in August. I read all but one of the ones that I set out to read, and that is In Other Words by Jhumpa Lahiri. Now, in my Women in Translation month video, like my TBR video for that, I actually made a mistake on that one. I said that Jhumpa Lahiri translated that book of essays from the Italian that she wrote in Italian to English, and actually she did not. So I do want to make sure that I make that correction. It was translated by Anna Goldstein, and Jhumpa Lahiri actually has a little sort of author's note about why she chose not to translate from the Italian into English, and part of it is just because for her, translating from Italian into English is a very frustrating endeavor, and it makes her feel very self-conscious about her abilities in Italian, and so she decided to hire a translator to do that. So I just wanted to make sure that I made that correction because I had assumed that Lahiri had just translated her essays, and that was a very unfortunate assumption on my part. And it was, I mean, it was, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I think that I had made an educated guess because she has translated other of her stories from Italian into English herself, and so I was just like, yeah, it makes sense that she would translate this book of essays on the art of translation herself. But obviously that's not what happened, and so that's fine. But still, it remains a very interesting concept that she has the parallel text of her original Italian text paired with the side-by-side English translation by Anna Goldstein, and I think that that's still a very cool format, and I do intend to read that still. I just did not get to do it in Women in Translation Month, unfortunately. I finished my thesis, I graduated, did all the things, had a bit of a panicky moment when I realized that the thesis was supposed to be submitted 2 days before I originally thought, which meant that I had to work, I think, about 11 hours on one day to get it done and submitted, and had a panic attack the day after. Didn't let myself panic. I didn't actually have a panic attack. I'm exaggerating the severity of what happened, but anyway, I had quite the stressful weekend last weekend because of that. Just kind of all of the stress that had built up just let itself out, and I think I've kind of just been coming off of that a little bit, and so been a little bit more on the low energy side of things. But yeah, so should probably talk about the books, right? Because that's what we're here for, and I'm already filming for 5 minutes. So let's get into them. These are in no particular order. These are not going to be in the order in which I read them. They're just going to be the ones that the order of the stack. So not part of Women in Translation Month, but part of Eric Cervini's Very Gay Book Club. This is from the box, the book box. I cut this out because I love this picture. It's from the AIDS. It's an image that was used by Grand Fury during the AIDS epidemic to basically it's like a propaganda image that says kissing doesn't kill. You can't get AIDS from kissing people. So that's where that image comes from, and the story behind it is actually really quite charming, and I really love it. So anyway, I love that image, and so I'm so happy that he has that as the like inside design of the book box. So anyway, we also got a really noisy cat toy, and I realized that I left it in this room, so I think the cats are going to start playing with that here in a second. So the book club book for August was Four Squares by Bobby Finger, and this is a dual timeline narrative that follows the same character, Artie Anderson, who is sort of a failed writer, basically, whose writer life started. I guess he's a failed novelist, is what you would consider him, because he does a lot of ghostwriting, is what we find out throughout the narrative. He wrote a novel called Four Squares, and it's about him and his friends living in New York City. And this follows his life in the 90s. It starts off in 1992 and goes all the way through like 1996 on that side of things. And then it also goes all the way up to 2022, where we find him obviously all of those years later, 30 years later, and he is a senior citizen. And it's all about him finding community and friendship in the sort of second half of his life. And I found that this was a really charming story. I loved the messaging around finding your self-worth and the fact that, you know, you're not too old to find friendship or love or inspiration or anything like that. And I think that it's a really lovely story about all of that. And then also just accepting aging as well. I think that we have plenty of stories that are all about people trying to avoid growing older, and obviously like the entire skincare and cosmetics industry is all about avoiding the effects of aging. And this one is a book that talks about accepting age with grace and just enjoying the time you have and all of that. So from that standpoint, I really love this. I obviously like this book because of the fact that the AIDS epidemic is in the background. One of the friends, you don't actually really meet this character, but one of the friends of Artie's passed away because of AIDS complications, and the fact that AIDS is still sort of in the background and it's discussed within their friend group is quite interesting. The things that Finger says about the, I guess, like feeling of existing post-AIDS was very, very interesting to me. So from that standpoint, I really liked this book. And I thought that as far as the writing goes, I would put it between like Stephen Rowley and Andrew Sean Greer. So let's just put it between the Gunkel and less as far as like complexity of narrative. I feel like Stephen Rowley's a little bit simple with the way that he writes. Not in a bad way, but it's just what it is. And then this takes a little bit of a level of complexity, and then obviously we have Less, which is a much more layered narrative. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that. Quite enjoyed this. Next, we are getting into the books for Women in Translation Month. I read Minor Detail by Adania Shibley, and this is a pretty interesting book. Again, we follow two timelines. It's divided up into two parts, and each timeline takes up half the narrative. This is really more of a novella. It's just over 100 pages. Let's see. This edition is 105 pages. And the first part of it is following an Israeli soldier who is it's unclear actually. He's an unnamed. Both of the characters are unnamed. He's an unnamed character. He's maybe like a captain or an officer in the Israeli occupational forces. Hi, cats. in the Israeli occupational forces occupying Palestine in the 1940s, and then there's a rape and a murder of a young Palestinian woman, and then you follow the first person narrative of a journalist who goes in looking for details of this. And I found this book to be very similar in its conception and the imagery to like a 19th century, sorry, not a 19th century, a 20th century French novel. I found that this was very similar in the way that it treats, again, its imagery and its symbolism to things like The Stranger by Albert Camus, and then Exile in the Kingdom as well, that short story collection that Camus published. I thought that this was very similar in its style and its just overall feel to it. So if you like Camus' writing, I think you would enjoy this one. And it's a very abrupt book. It's definitely not an easy read. You can definitely see where things are going in this one. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed the imagery that Shibli was working with on this one, and I thought that the spider bite and the overall rot of this Israeli officer was quite fascinating. And then also just like the dog barking in the background constantly was an interesting imagery. An interesting image. So yeah, would definitely recommend this one. I think that it definitely deserves all of the acclaim that it has gotten, and yeah, definitely give it a read because it's very short. I also read Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, and translated by the legendary Anton Her. Oh, I should give you the translator of Minor Detail. It was translated by Elizabeth Jacquet, and yeah, so that's the translator. So yes, translated by Anton Her. We love him. We love all of his translations. This is like more or less a horror sort of collection of short stories. It's like, yeah, you would label it as horror. I would not say that anything in here is scary. It's certainly horrific. I very much enjoyed it. It's chronically readable. It's one that I easily finished in like a day and a half, even though it's, over 200 pages. Yeah, I really, really liked the stories in here. I don't think there was a single one that was bad. I particularly liked Snare and Ruler of the Winds and Sands. I think those two in particular were fantastic. And I really liked the social commentary, I think, that's baked into each of these stories. They're all quite fascinating in the way that you can interpret them. The first story in this, as, our waste coming back to haunt us, is fascinating. And yeah, I think that this also deserves all of the hype that it receives. Bora Chung is obviously a very talented writer, and Anton Her is clearly a very talented and knowledgeable translator, because these stories were all pretty varied in their style and tone. So I think that, yeah, it's a great short story collection. But if you're afraid to pick these up because you see them labeled as horror, don't be afraid. They're not scary. They're not anything that's going to keep you up at night. I'm somebody who is very sensitive to being spooked, and these did nothing for me. They're just interesting. And then especially with like the Ruler of the Sand and Winds, that one, is that right? Ruler of Winds and Sands. That's just like fantasy. It's not really a horror one. It's more of like a fable type book, type story. So yeah, definitely give this a read. If you're on the fence about it, I can definitely put my recommendation behind it, if that's something that matters to you. Okay, so now let us look at this atrocious cover. It's terrible. Just like Why? Why? The UK cover, the European covers are so much better than this one, and I'm pretty sure that the paperback of this one is also much better than this. This is just atrocious. I don't know who made this decision, but whatever. So this is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck, and it's translated by Michael Hoffman. This won the International Booker Prize this year, and I don't know. I did not enjoy this book at all. I thought it was pretty boring, pretty blah, I guess, as far as enjoyment goes. However, I do recognize the brilliance of the actual story. This follows Hans and what's the girl's name? Her name is Katharina. That's right. And Katharina is 19 at the beginning of the story. Hans is 34 years her senior, so he's 53. And is that right? I'm dumb and gay and bad at math, so if that math is wrong, just, yeah, cut me some slack. So the narrative in this is supposed to mirror the East and West Berlin situation. It takes place in East Berlin, and from that standpoint, I was very fascinated, I was very captivated by that. I really found the life that Erpenbeck brought into the East German atmosphere quite fascinating, and because I think that in American schools, for sure, East Germany is just put off as this, like, dystopic wasteland, because obviously it was more of the communist side of things, and so because it's communism, it is therefore bad, and therefore it's just a wasteland where people had to stand in bread lines for days to get their food. And this kind of corrects the narrative, because it's by a German about the German situation there, and it gives you a very, what I'm assuming is a very accurate and very real portrait of East Germany and then the two characters that are in it. Obviously, there are a lot of ethical questions that that the book definitely deals with Hans and Katharina, the fact that he is 53, the fact that she's 19, and their relationship is very tense for a lot of reasons. Hans is also a married man. And yeah, I think that Hans, frankly, is just a piece of shit, especially in the second half of this. There's a point where the narrative distinctly shifts and Hans becomes a pretty despicable character. It gets very difficult to read from that point on, mostly because of just how, honestly, kind of repetitive it gets with the BS that's going on in with the relationship. But at the same time, it's a pretty effective look into a toxic and abusive relationship. I mean, Katharina is definitely the most interesting character in this book. You definitely feel for her. She is a young woman who is completely stranded in the middle of a sea of men. The books that she reads are by men. The philosophical ideas that she is informed by originate from male thinkers. The music that she listens to are from male composers. The poetry she reads are all male poets. And then obviously the intellectual life and the relationship she has is from Hans, who's a male writer. And so you kind of you're very concerned for her identity because of the fact that she does not have any females in her life that she does not have any female influences, and she's just completely, again, stranded in this male ocean. And it's from that standpoint, again, it's quite interesting. Yeah, she's definitely a character that I've been thinking about a lot ever since I read this book. I don't know if it really deserved to win the prize, but also I don't have any room to talk because I've not read any of the other books on the long list for the International Booker Prize. I think I have one other one on my shelf, The Crooked Plow. Yeah, that's the only other one that I have. So, and I've not read it yet, so I can't actually say like does this deserve to win in comparison to the others. But it was still a very fascinating read. So, did I enjoy it? No, not at all. Was I intellectually stimulated and did I find it a very fascinating read as far as the content and craft of the novel? Absolutely. So from a writer's perspective, this is a great book. This is a fantastic novel from a craft and literary standpoint, but as far as a reading experience, if you're reading for enjoyment, not going to be your cup of tea for sure. So I'm sort of like in the very middle of this one because I did not enjoy it, but I did get a lot out of it, and I think that that's okay. And I think it's an okay place to be. I do really respect Erpenbeck as an author because this clearly was a monumental work. So maybe it did deserve to win. Maybe that's what I'm arriving at here as I'm talking out loud, thinking out loud, because you always talk out loud. Okay, so that's Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck, and then obviously like this is all about it's a different type of time. Chronos is the passage of time of like events passing, the chronology, so like a recitation of historical facts, whereas Kairos is the time that you feel, the like experiential time, the time that you perceive. Yeah, that obviously is a piece of the narrative in here is working with time, and so that from that standpoint, it's also quite cool. I say standpoint a lot, don't I? Okay, so that's this book. Definitely glad I read it for sure. Have no regrets about reading it. Okay, now probably my favorite book that I read. Well, okay, so second favorite book that I read for women in favorite book I read for Women in Translation Month. Second favorite book that I read this month is none other than The Wondrous and Tragic Life of Ivan and Ivana by Maryse Conde. This book is phenomenal. I loved pretty much everything about this book. I think that Maryse Conde, I saw her compared to Toni Morrison in the content of her work and just like the overall style of her writing, the themes that she deals with, and I can agree. I'm somebody that really likes Toni Morrison and has read a fair amount of her work actually. I think about half of her books now I've read. So I think I can accurately say that Maryse Conde is for sure the Caribbean Toni Morrison, if you will. This book was translated by her husband, Maryse Conde's husband, not Toni Morrison's husband. I love that her husband Richard Philcox is the translator. I think that that's so special and such a wonderful option for somebody to translate the book, because I think that who knows you better than aside from yourself than your partner, right? And he's I guess translated all of her work, and that's just a lovely thing. Anyway, my brain is like leaving my head at the moment, and so my commentary I think is going to devolve from here, but anyway, we'll see. Yeah, he talks about it being a like conversation that he has with her and a sort of reliving of their relationship, and I think that that's just such a lovely and special thing. So this book is highly allegorical. It's one that you cannot read too literally because it does talk about incest, kind of. It's never consummated, but it's definitely something that is in the background of their lives. But it's not something that you should read literally. It's something that you have to sort of analyze psychologically and look at what they're representing in the narrative, because that's very much what Conde does. Is her characters always are representative of particular ideas or themes or phenomena, and so that's what we're dealing with Ivan and Ivana. Now, Ivan becomes radicalized and becomes kind of like a terrorist, and Ivana she's inspired by compassion to become a police officer, which unfortunately you don't actually get a lot of Ivana in this book. I think there would have been some really interesting passages that Conde could have put in here of Ivana's like not transition, but just like her the formation of these ideas that she wants to become a police officer, and also her interactions within the police academy as a black woman coming from Guadeloupe in Paris would have been fascinating. But yeah, Ivana is just like not really a character in this. She's just sort of a side thought, and it really focuses mostly on Ivan. Um, and it crosses quite a lot of geography. So it starts in Guadeloupe. Well, actually, it starts in Utero, and then it goes to Guadeloupe. Then it goes to Mali, and finally it ends in Paris. And what you're basically seeing here is a representation of the effects of colonization. That, just plain and simple, that's what it is. So you start with Guadeloupe, which is a state, a French state, in the same way that Hawaii is a state recognized as a state in the United States. And so Guadeloupe is that. So anybody born in Guadeloupe is a French citizen because it's France, right? And so it is a colony, so it's effectively a colony of France. Then you move to Mali, which is a former colony of France. And then you move to the colonizer itself in Paris. So you go to currently colonized, post-colonial, colonizer. Those three spaces. And you witness the effects on these two very different people who are basically sides of the same coin. And I think that that's kind of what Conde is getting at, is that a lot of the things that we are dealing with in the 20th and 21st century are all kind of sides of the same coin. Capitalism versus communism or socialism, race, post-racial, the state versus the individual. They're all very connected. I did find that there were a lot of really interesting lines. I underlined the crap out of this book. And yeah, again, super, super interesting as far as like symbolism goes. So give this a read if you're curious. I think Maryse Conde, again, is definitely one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, and 21st century, if you will, because this was published in 2017. I guess that's all I have to say about this, and definitely loved this book. Finally, we have a book that I gave a dedicated review to and will link in the bio, and that is Brown Women Have Everything by my friend and mentor Sayantani Dasgupta. And these are essays on discomfort, comfort, and delight, going from Bangladesh, New Delhi, and going to Moscow, Idaho to be not only a creative writing student, but then also a creative writing teacher, and then finally becoming a full-time faculty professor at University of North Carolina in Wilmington. They're great. They're very funny. They're all about just being a brown woman in predominantly white spaces and the way that she finds comfort and deals with discomfort in all of those spaces. And just like being a teacher in America right now, because she has an essay on what to do in case of an active shooter and the way that she grapples with that as being somebody who is responsible not only for her safety, but the safety of her students, and just also encountering the wackiness that is the people of Moscow, Idaho, which I lived there for a long time. It's technically where I was born. So, like, I know very, very intimately the wackiness of the people of that town. So she captures it very well in this. And these are just very fun. They're very conversational. This is probably my favorite book that I read this month. And I was given the review copy so that I could give a dedicated review, which I did. And you can definitely check that out if you want to hear more thoughts on that. But yeah. Sayantani is very funny, she's very clever, and she's very insightful. And I think if you are looking for fun, humor, insight, and great food descriptions, you should definitely check this out. And that is my thoughts on Brown Women Have Everything by Sayantani Dasgupta. those are all the books that I read in August. It was a pretty wide variety of things, and I'm really glad that I did actually set aside all of that time to read women in translation. I think that this is definitely the first August that I've made a concentrated effort to read only, read primarily books by women in translation, and I think that it worked very well for me, and I very much enjoyed all of that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have for you now. I'm hoping to get another video out this coming week that's a little bit more in depth on some things that I've wanted to talk about, primarily about In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, and also Call Me by Your Name, the bane of my existence. So I have some things that I want to talk about both of those. Hopefully I can get that out by the end of the week, and hopefully this video drops relatively soon. I'm going to stop talking because we are at 35 minutes. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to go enjoy my birthday, and until I see you next time, take care. Like and subscribe to all the YouTube things. Leave a comment down below if you've read any of those books, or which books did you read during Women in Translation Month, because I would love to know. Alright, thank you again for watching. Take care, and bye-bye.